Hello, everybody. It's Amanda Ellison here, Executive Director of the Wilson Research Institute for Health and Wellbeing. Thank you so much for coming along to the first of our academic seminar series of this engagement series this year. I'd like to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, to leave your cameras on, because it's really great to be able to see who's here and to have a look at facial expressions as we go along. If that's okay with you and you can, then please do feel free to leave your cameras on. And also to let you know that it is our intention to video this and record this seminar just for posterity and for resource purposes. And so if you have a problem with that, please do feel free to message Susie. So on behalf of my co-directors and I, it gives me great pleasure today to introduce you to our Professor in Practice, Nicola Wilson. And she will shortly give our first academic seminar of this year's engagement series. Nicola's early career saw her designing and providing strategic and operational leadership of mental health and wellbeing services within the NHS and education sectors. She was program leader in training CBT therapists and mental health nurses of the future at the University of Cumbria. Between 2012 and 15, Nicola returned to the NHS as Senior EU Health Specialist in the North of England EU Health Partnership, facilitating valuable knowledge exchange opportunities and creating informal trans-European networks of clinical and research excellence. Nicola has gone on to become the Managing Director of Northern Health Matters Limited, as well as taking on the role of Chief of Staff and more latterly, Deputy CEO of the Northern Health Science Alliance. So it's in this capacity that I first got to know Nicola about 5 years ago. She's been instrumental in consortia relationship building, brokering and facilitating domestic and international collaborations and knowledge exchange activities, utilising contacts and networks across Europe and the US. She's been a valued friend in the continued evolution of our strategy and a robust advocate for the aims of our Academy, not just in the fellowship of the Wilson Research Institute for Health and Wellbeing, but the Academy of Durham University as a whole. I'm delighted that Nick has agreed to come and talk with us today about collaboration, leveraging her extensive experience to discuss how best we can make it work for us. So thank you, and over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Amanda. Gosh, I don't recognise myself in all of that. That was really great. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, the slides aren't moving for some reason. There we go. Apologies. There's always a technical hitch at the beginning, isn't there? So, hi, everyone. So, as Amanda says, I'm Nick Wilson, and I'm really excited and humbled to have been invited to speak with you today on the subject of bringing meaning and authenticity to collaboration. So I've switched off all my phone and computer alerts, but I apologise if a knock at the door sets off our Labrador Oscar. By way of introduction, I am first and foremost a life partner, a mum, a stepmum and a granny. But when I'm not busy doing all of that, I work as the Deputy Chief Executive of an organisation called the Northern Health Science Alliance, and I was appointed a Professor in Practice at Durham University's Wilson Research Institute in December 2019. And this title was conferred in recognition of my contribution to the fields of research and business. So the Northern Health Science Alliance was created back in 2013, primarily to address the imbalance in the amount of funding given for health and life science research between the north of England and what is colloquially known as the Golden Triangle of London, Oxford and Cambridge. The NHSA's mission is to unlock the combined potential of the amazing assets in research and innovation that the health and life science community across the north possesses to benefit our people and our economy with the vision of a healthy and prosperous region powered by excellence, which is also closely tied with industry partners and citizen involvement. Back in 2013, the NHSA was created to bring together 8 research active universities and 8 large teaching hospital trusts across the north, who were then later joined by the 4 academic health science networks. In 2018, we opened up a new membership option, that of associate member, so that organisations and institutions that weren't already members of the Alliance could join us. And since that time, we've had 4 further members join, bringing the Alliance to the 24 members that it has today. So the NHSA was born out of a recognised need arising from years of disparity in the amount of health and research funding experienced by the founding institutions and organisations across the North. And that when going it alone doesn't necessarily have the desired effect, working in concert and collaboration as the NHSA will. Apologies, my slides have stuck again. It's very frustrating. So, as previously mentioned, the Alliance has members within the university sector, the NHS and academic health science networks. Here you can see a list of our university members, Durham University being one of the founding members, and then University of Central Lancashire and Sheffield Hallam being 2 of the most recent members to join under the associate member opportunity. As we move through the list of members, here you can see our NHS member organisations, and notably it was through the associate member opportunity that 2 mental health trusts joined the Alliance. And here you can see the final 4 members, our academic health science networks, or AHSNs, whose primary role is to ensure the adoption of innovation within our healthcare system. As you can see, the AHSNs are mapped to a sub-regional geography, with the academic health science network for the North East and North Cumbria stretching across the top of the north and below the Scottish border. Ours is a very small team that works across a very large geography, and key to our role is to ensure that the collective offer of what the North is doing is promoted. We work with our member organisations to showcase their research and innovation excellence and impact, and work with funders to secure greater investment in the North. This is done through distinct programmes of work mapped to the expertise the North has to offer, such as healthy ageing, health inequalities, digital and medtech, data and AI, mental health, and advanced therapies. Each programme of activity has a dynamic network attached to it, who are brought together by the programme leads and provided opportunity to collaborate in response to perhaps the funding call or knowledge exchange with their peers, or to advocate on behalf of the North at meetings and events. Aside from my operational activity as the Deputy Chief Executive, I lead the Healthy Ageing Programme, and a key aspect of that role is supporting collaboration between a number of members at any one given time. Because when large institutions and organisations such as Durham are working together in concert with other institutions, the benefits and impacts are multiplied. So acting as a convener of collaboration has featured as a key aspect of each role that I have had since 2006. And I'll talk a little bit more about my background and how my passion for collaboration began. My early career started out, as Amanda said, as a cognitive behavioural therapist. And for those who aren't familiar with CBT, it's an evidence-based psychological intervention most commonly used for the treatment of anxiety disorders and depression. In 2006, I was appointed to lead a university service with the purpose of redesigning the delivery. Historically, the service that I inherited had been a very traditional one that offered one model of talking therapy. If you're familiar with the fields of counselling, mental health, or psychology, you will know that there are a range of models or types of therapy which are collectively known as psychological interventions, and CBT is just one of them. So I set about designing a service for the students which was based on 2 guiding principles. Firstly, that an intervention was what was being requested by the student, and secondly, that the university was part of that student's bigger world. So within this context, an intervention means to prevent further harm and or improve a person's functioning. And based upon this, it's fair to assume that most people who access counselling or mental health services are indeed seeking an intervention. With a whole host of variables at play, for example, the reason why someone accesses a service and how long they've been in distress, there is no one intervention that universally suits either all people or all types of emotional or psychological distress. We knew that the university was only a part of the student's life, and that there were people outside of the university setting with whom the service might not have an existing relationship, who might either have pieces of the picture important to making the intervention, or who might be needed at a future date to make a more intensive intervention. But even more importantly, we recognised that we as the service had neither all the answers nor all the skills. So here was where my first experience of professional collaboration was born. Firstly, in creating a multi-model, going back to that one size doesn't fit all premise, and multidisciplinary service, where talking therapy was only one of a suite of options being available. Secondly, building relationships with services outside of the university to facilitate a stronger network of support was crucial. By way of example, this meant that with the students' express permission, we could speak with a mental health team that they had worked with before coming to university to better inform our collective understanding of what had previously taken place, or we could facilitate a referral pathway to mental health services local to the university should the need arise. So it was also where I learned the valuable lesson that just because something hasn't been done before, it doesn't mean that it can never happen. With collaboration comes transparency and accountability. There are, and rightly so, very strict rules which govern healthcare when it comes to information sharing and confidentiality. And much of the resistance I met in the early days when talking to people about this new way of working was countered with, well, what about confidentiality? So as we explored and delivered this new model of working, we discovered that, by way of example, when we asked students their permission to speak with their previous service, by explaining why we wanted to do it and the parameters of the engagement we would have, the vast majority of students gave their permission. Between 2010 and 2012, I worked in a faculty post at the same university, but then in 2012, I was asked by my head of faculty if I would be interested in undertaking a secondment to a team tasked with building research collaborations between the north of England and other regions of mainland Europe. At the time, it is safe to say that I had little or no knowledge of the complex world of European research frameworks, but I did know how to get systems that had historically operated independently to speak to each other. So, with little knowledge of the former, I set about reading voraciously and learning the mechanisms of the European Commission and the variety of funding streams available to health researchers and clinicians. Richard Branson once famously said, if someone offers you an amazing opportunity and you're not sure you can do it, say yes and then learn how to do it later. But colleagues, to avoid the perception of winging it, I would perhaps change those last words of his advice to learn how to do it quickly. When I took this opportunity by both hands, I knew that there were gaps in my technical knowledge, but that I could perhaps draw strength from my skills, transferable skills, if you like, those that made me a good therapist, the emotional intelligence it takes to communicate and foster engagement with and between people. There were many transferable skills from my previous world into the new world of European collaboration. The technical knowledge, if you like, in therapy, that would be the theory, and in research collaboration, the funding frameworks. And then the emotional intelligence skills of communication and engagement. Collaboration, whether in working together to overcome psychological distress or in joining together to answer a research question requires a level of trust only achievable through drawing upon emotional intelligence. Being multilingual as a convener of collaboration is mission critical. This was something that I discovered from my time working at the university previously, and also whilst working across Europe. But when it comes to Europe, I don't mean multilingual in the literal sense. The convener of collaboration is not fluent in the subject because the subject fluency lies in the expertise of the various parties you are bringing together to collaborate. The convener needs enough knowledge of the languages spoken by all the parties to understand them, but also importantly, to help the parties understand each other. Throughout the 4 years I spent with the European team, and more lately in my 5 years with the NHSA, I have worked to encourage and facilitate collaboration between institutions, organisations and businesses that have often historically been in competition for funding and for talent, which are two very protected features of competition. That role as the convener, whilst not for the faint-hearted, is one that I'm not only passionate about, but I also encourage the wider generation and the next generations coming behind me to undertake. Someone I spoke with recently used the term eyes up and out to describe the ethos that collaboration requires. And it stuck with me, it resonated with me. At a micro level, it is demonstrated by colleagues at Durham, for example, our member organisations who really get the value of collaboration and joining forces with their peers. On a macro level, the eyes up and out ethos is demonstrated by the significant progress we've made in changing attitudes to historic challenges, such as climate change, misuse of power in all its forms, and attitudes to mental ill health. Just as an aside, eyes up and out isn't a thing. When you Google it, eyes up and out, you get this list of eye conditions. So when I think about how collaboration has influenced cultural or societal reform, I think of examples such as the civil rights movement from 1954 to 1968 in the United States, the Me Too movement, which started when in 2017, an American actress, Alyssa Milano, posted on Twitter, "If all the women who've been sexually harassed or assaulted wrote Me Too as a status, we might give people a sense of the magnitude of the problem." And then there's the passing of laws in many countries that have seen same-sex couples being granted the rightful equality in the eyes of the law as heterosexual couples. When I think of collaborations that have advanced scientific discoveries, I immediately think of examples such as in vitro fertilization and the discovery of the virus, which led to AIDS. Similar to my ethos I shared earlier, where I spoke about there being no one psychological intervention that suits all, and that a multidisciplinary range of interventions makes for an accessible service, it's my belief that we make advances through collaboration because we each have a piece of the jigsaw. We each bring a skill to the collective party, and that the sum is greater than the parts in terms of resulting impact. Throughout the 1960s and the 1970s, Robert Edwards, a physiologist, and Jean Purdy, a nurse and embryologist, were working on the biological mechanisms of reproduction with their team at Cambridge University, with the early focus of their research being on genetic disorders. Meanwhile, Patrick Steptoe had been a consultant obstetrician at Oldham General Hospital since 1951. And he had been pioneering surgical advances, notably the benefits of laparoscopic surgery in gynecology, where recovery times were drastically reduced due to the patient only being given a couple of small incisions, whereas previously laparotomy required a larger incision. So these colleagues met on a conference circuit, and they pooled not only their respective expertise, but also that of their teams. It's also very important to put this example of scientific collaboration in historical context in terms of logistical obstacles that they had to overcome. It took place long before the days of modern electronic communication, and with a geographical distance between the parties requiring a 12-hour round trip, it was taking place when the use of video to make a phone call was still science fiction. Their pioneering work was not without controversy, and regardless of where we sit in the ethical debate surrounding assisted fertility, what we do know was that in scientific and clinical attitudes up until the 1960s, the field of infertility was not recognised as a challenge to be overcome. In his 2011 journal article, Johnson writes that although Edwards, Purdy and Steptoe were very different personalities, they each brought very different skills to the project. They shared energy, commitment and vision. Each was also marginalised by their professional peers, a marginalisation that also perhaps helped to cement their partnership. For anyone interested in reading more on the collaborative path to IVF success, I can certainly recommend this article by Martin Johnson titled Robert Edwards, The Path to IVF, published in 2011 in Reproductive Biomedicine Online. And now, in a don't just take my word for it fashion, in preparation for this talk, I spoke with a couple of the members of my network to capture their thoughts on the meaning of collaboration. And building upon the principles we've just heard about in the IVF story, let's hear from Angela and build some of those threads around the various pieces of the jigsaw that they brought together, about how when the results of collaboration don't usually have an overnight success eureka moment, the importance of keeping your faith in what you're trying to achieve is what keeps you going, and also about the importance of an inquiring mind.
And actually helping shape that through the individuals that work in the team is really, really powerful. And sometimes the shape of the research can actually move from what the idea was into something which is a lot bigger and better because of the inquiring mind and the diversity and inclusion of different voices in that approach as well. But yeah, if you've got an inquiring mind, you can achieve anything. So if you are going to go into some form of collaboration, listen and respect what others are saying and actually use that as the tool to actually collaborate and say, okay, then this is what my views are, this is what yours are. Okay, I might not disagree, and actually coming together with a common purpose through that safe environment to say, okay, then how are we going to drive this forward and collaborate for the right reason, and what is that common purpose? So it's having that space where you can speak regardless of your position in a hierarchy and having that respect back, and that's where the best team science actually comes from, is having that diverse and inclusive voice from many different backgrounds. It's not just one clinician or one academic, it's the entire team approach and the ability for them to all have a say and to be listened to. So it's actually changing the shift that you can never deliver. The best research that we do is in a team science approach. It's where everybody is part of that project and they're recognised for that. And we're actually doing a piece of work at the moment around the whole culture of research, where we need to understand the importance of team. It's not just one individual or two or three, it's the entire team approach and getting that recognised in the metrics that are used for research excellence. So it's about everybody has a voice and everybody takes part in the delivery of that piece of work, and you should be recognised for that. 2 examples of that, and it actually shows you how long some of these things take to actually have an impact. So don't think impact happens in very short periods. It can take a long time.
Brilliant.
So about 15, that's a long time ago, 15 years ago, I worked with a fantastic guy, Professor Sir Doug Turnbull, who pioneered mitochondrial replacement, and it was term 3 parent baby, you know, where you could actually take some of the faulty DNA and, you know, as part of the IVF treatment, and then that would actually make a huge impact to parents, to the children, and to society as a whole. And working with him very early on to say, we've got a really good idea here, from taking that research from the bench and having an impact on society, was just fantastic. And finding the funding in my role as an accountant and saying, okay, I get you, we can work this through, to then see the impact that that has had in the NHS is just fantastic. Another one, a guy called Roy Taylor, type 2 diabetes and how he can reverse it, helping to, as part of a team, again, a collaborative approach to find funding for an MRI scanner, to then for him to come one day and say, I think I can reverse type 2 diabetes. I can't eat and need some more funding for that. And then to see what's happened now, where it is part of an embedded treatment in the NHS, is just fantastic. But these things take a long time to happen, and it's just having that ability to collaborate and say, okay, then how can I be part of that overall solution?
Yeah.
And then look back and think, crikey, I was part of that. And we're doing it, you know, all of the time during the COVID pandemic, working across the university and the NHS systems to get the vaccine response we did, to get the patients involved in those studies. And I think one of the things with research is that there has been for such a long time the fear of failure. There's nothing wrong with failure. That's how you learn.
Yeah.
You know, and that's one of the things that actually helps with what I said, psychological safety earlier on. Within our team, you know, you've got the permission to fail. Research, if you fail, then that's fine. That's still an outcome. You know, you've got a hypothesis and it didn't work. You should be publishing that. There's nothing wrong with that. So it's changing the mindset around failing, and, you know, that you have permission to do that. But sometimes things also take a very long time to actually generate the impact that you would think. But don't lose faith. Keep at it. Keep at it would be my advice. My name's Angela.
So returning to the topic of the scientific advances through collaboration, next we have here an article headline from the New York Times in 1982, which alerted the readers to an emerging public health threat of its time. Sometimes, in a world where we're all too often tempted by the desire for recognition as an individual, we risk losing sight of what can be achieved by bringing our work together with like minds who are working on the same problem. Whereas I was a child of 10 when Louise Brown, the first IVF live birth, was born in 1978, I was a teenager with the accompanying raging hormones when a condition formerly known as GRID, gay-related immunodeficiency, and now known as AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, became part of our cultural, social, and political parlance. In the 1980s, French virologist Luc Montagnier and his team at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, and American physician scientist Robert Gallo and his team at the National Cancer Institute in Maryland in the USA, were credited with their roles in the discovery of the HIV virus as the infectious agent responsible for AIDS. For Montagnier and Gallo, it was not a harmonious path to collaboration, but one of professional rivalry and battle, because both of them were working on what was, in essence, the same question: what causes the syndrome? It was 1984 before they agreed to join their forces of transatlantic expertise, and eventually Montagnier and Gallo were credited as co-discoverers. For someone like me, as perhaps many of you also, who lived through these times, the very recent pandemic certainly served as a reminder of the fear that is born out of ignorance. When we don't know what causes something, when we don't know how to treat it, but add into that mix a very different times attitude towards the marginalized group who were being affected. I'll come to the correlation between activism and collaboration soon, But now I'd like us to hear from another one of my colleagues on the role collaboration plays in the rapid spread of learning, how politics has to be set aside, and the importance of maintaining positivity in the face of adversity.
I think I've always had a passion for collaboration, even before I started my career. It's just something that comes naturally anyway to me, and I enjoy doing, because I enjoy people and working together with people, be it in coursework situations in senior school, to group work in university, to actually starting in the healthcare sector. I think something that always strikes me is I haven't got to where I am now without that sort of skill, and I think it's a key skill whether you're in the healthcare sector or any sector. I think collaboration is something that people need to learn to do if it doesn't come naturally, and it's it's one of the great things that solves issues and rapidly shares learning and best practice as well. So I think it's something that I've always been excited about, and something that comes. It takes someone from each of those areas to have a high performing team. So I think it's really important that we naturally tick all those boxes when collaborating and not weight it too heavily, because if you have too much of the same, be it interdisciplinary or same personality type, the chances of you driving things forward or actually solving a problem or going down one route and not considering other routes, of which there may be better routes to go down, are lessened significantly. So I think it's good to have a mixture of the two, but I'd really encourage not just the interdisciplinary side of things, but more the personality trait side of things as well, to get things moving forward. If you're looking at a professional perspective, from my role currently in the NHSX Innovation Collaborative, our values are nurturing that learning system and sharing best practice and supporting the spread and adoption of digital transformation. So you've got to look at what your values are for collaboration and ensure everyone's sort of aligned to those. I think you need to be really defined on what the output of that collaboration is going to be as it evolves. It's okay to start off not really knowing and just knowing the topic area and let it organically evolve. But I think that's something that comes from discussion and engagement and enthusiasm.
I agree, and I think that very often as well, the true sort of collaboration is often when there's no funding envelope attached, isn't it? It's that coalition of the willing where it comes from.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that in terms of I mean, we've had a conversation previously around you can leave the politics at the door, and you can you've got to work from a place of goodness on why you're doing this. Exactly. And when you're looking at it from a health perspective, you've always got to draw it back to the person and have that person-centered approach. So what is the impact of this gonna have? If there is no funding for it, then part of that collaboration, I would say, is to find funding for it and to look for that funding and put something strong together. So it's okay to get together, even if there is no defined funding for something or there is no defined plan. Sometimes when you scope out an opportunity or you're doing some horizon scanning, doing a bit of a think tank, for example, you go into the room to look for those sorts of things. And I think that's where the creativity starts, and that's where the real excitement starts in collaboration, because there's a license to be creative. And that's what it's all about. I would say some of the major roadblocks to collaboration, I think you can always break it down to people, process, planning, and culture. So you've got the people around the table. Everyone's a different character. We've talked about interdisciplinary points of view. We've talked about personality traits. So there's that to think about, and how people communicate with each other, and how people engage with each other, how you build rapport with people, because it's important that you find some common ground with stakeholders and collaborators. On the whole, I think, if you can get on with them and like each other, that's always a positive, but it's not always going to be the case in a professional setting. But that doesn't stop you doing your job, and it doesn't stop them doing the job as well. Process, is there something in the process that is causing a sticking point to driving the collaboration forward? So then you've got to look at, what is it? Is it decision making? Is it delivery? Is it implementation? And that takes you onto the planning side of things. So is there something that could have been planned better, or some risks and issues that we need to mitigate? And that takes you down I'd say what I would call the more formal collaboration in terms of those governance routes, where you need to address those sorts of things. And then I would also draw it back to the culture. I'm really big on culture. I think, you know, creating a good working culture or collaborative culture makes people feel as though they're in a safe space to actually speak their views. And if you're in a bit of a toxic culture or, you know, hierarchical culture, you know, that can stifle some of that as well and affect the collaboration. So I think culture is something that's a golden thread that runs throughout all those.
And we hear about resilience a lot in terms of, you know, your professional and personal life, and kind of what role you think that has to this and how you maintain resilience in the face of adversity.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's spoken about a lot more now, but I think it's something that everyone needs to learn. You're not going to get everything right all the time. No one's perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone falls off the horse. You know, it's about getting back on it, and it's learning that when you have made a mistake, to learn from that mistake and come back. And you can do that as a person, whether, you know, you drop the ball in a collaborative and, you know, it's about putting your hand up and saying, oh, well, actually, you know, I think, you know, on reflection, we could do a bit of a pivot and do it this way, or, you know, how do you mitigate the issue? I think it's okay to drop the ball, but you need to come up with a solution to then take it forward. Being resilient is a key skill, I think, to learn. Some people are naturally resilient, and I would take that back to personal experience. So some people have had to learn resilience earlier than others. Some people have had more challenging times than others. Some people have been brought up in different environments than others, and all that nurtures things like resilience. So dealing with adversity, I think we're all going to have to learn to deal with, be it sooner or later. But from a professional setting in collaboration, adversity is something that we're certainly going to come up against, and it's maintained in the face of professionalism within adversity as well. Adversity, I think, can be a good thing if you look at it through the right lens. You can either frame it as a real negative and let it affect you, or you can frame it as, you know, this is a chance for me to grow and overcome something, be it a difficult conversation, be it, you know, something there needs to be a solution to something. So I think adversity is an actual good thing, and it's something that we should all strive towards being the most resilient that we can be. You know, be transparent about what the problems are and the issues are, and openly face those and talk about them, because that's part of collaboration, to talk about things and overcome them and find a way forward.
So here I've got some final observations which aren't taken from textbooks, but they're perhaps observations and experience that have built up over the last 15 years of working in the field of collaboration. I'd ask you to be open to the concept of how closely collaboration correlates with activism. It is usually because we feel a sense of injustice is taking place that we choose to join forces with others to overcome a political, cultural, or societal challenge, back to my examples of civil rights, sexual violence, and discriminatory practice. And the field of collaboration to solve health and well-being challenges is no different, and often linked to addressing inequalities, whether they are in funding or access to health services. Convening collaboration and playing a leading role in the collaboration are very different and require a different skill set. Convening requires patience, humility, diplomacy, and the multilingual skills I mentioned earlier. I don't self-identify as a leader. I am an introvert who has learned how to look normal in an extrovert world. The leader is perhaps the person whose name is on the bid application, or the most experienced subject specialist. The convener works with the leader to bring the necessary forces together, to get the right people in the room at the right time, to coordinate and to cat herd. If a collaboration converts to a formal project, the convener will usually take a role within a project management or dissemination work package. It's fair to say that at the outset of any new collaboration, the convener will usually take the lead because someone has to start the conversation. But then, if you were a fly on the wall watching proceedings, you might see the convener slowly and quietly start to step back and let the expertise shine and the magic happen. Networking has become a bit lost in translation recently. And I have to be honest, when I see an event has time for networking, a little piece of my soul dies, because it's almost become synonymous with speed dating. How many people can I talk to in a very short space of time? For me, it isn't a verb, it's a noun, defined by the Oxford Dictionary as a group or system of interconnected people or things. Having a network is mission critical to collaboration, because your network will have its own networks. And if you don't know the right person to connect to, a member of your network will. I've listed here 3 books, only a selection of which have inspired or influenced me along my career pathway. Interestingly, and perhaps rather obscurely, I wanted to include the first of my selection, which is written by a former FBI director who had the pleasure of working for and being fired by Donald Trump. I've included it because it maybe looks like a random or left field choice on paper, but sometimes inspiration and wisdom comes from a place you least expect. And I would urge you to be open to that also. I cannot recommend James Comey's book highly enough for the author's emotional intelligence as he recounts his experience of navigating highly politicized waters. It's been my absolute pleasure to speak with you today and to share my insights and my experiences. I want to say a huge thank you to the Wilson Institute, and especially its director, Amanda, for being my wing woman on many an occasion and for extending the invite to speak to you today. I think we now have some time for discussion and for questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Nick.